is leadership philosophy, decision making. I think you spent 10 years in the Royal Norwegian Army. Do you think that was quite, substantial in the way you sort of created your type of leadership, that you brought that? Is there something you brought from all those years in the army, or that sort of
I wouldn't say that I brought anything, but you're right. I spent 13 years in the Navy, among other things, as commanding officer on one of the Norwegian Navy vessels. I think what really formed me during that period is the fact that you get so much responsibility at such a young age. So that is perhaps the experiences that have formed me most. The fact that at the age of late 20s, I was already a commanding officer, and then you have a responsibility for a complement of maybe 25, 30 people. So of course that's an important experience to bring with you, this feeling of responsibility and taking care of people and making sure they are safe and so on.
Does that also maybe mean that you're not afraid of delegating something that is maybe a complicated issue if you see a younger person in the organization showing all the right signs to, run with the tasks?
I think maybe not delegation is the key word. I think you get good at kind of evaluating the capacities of people by having a leadership position for such a long time. And I think you also, which is partly delegation, but it's really it's fun to see when you give people opportunities that they actually grow from those opportunities. And then you cannot delegate responsibility, so it's still your responsibility, but you can facilitate for people to actually show their capacities.
And make them grow, task after task, maybe. Yeah. That's also an interesting perspective, because a lot of people tuning in here are, new professionals in the maritime industry, want to create an interesting career. Is there anything you've seen in the Odfjell system or, from the Ship Owner Association, do you see any common patterns of the people you see sort of come in as a young professional and are able to take all the steps to become a professional executive? Is it just that they have more passion than the others? Because shipping is, of course, an industry where you always can develop. The market is 24/7. But do you see any patterns in the people you see are coming through that makes them perfect for shipping in 2026?
Very few have that passion when they enter the business. But those who have the ability to develop this passion during their career, I would say they certainly have an advantage. So because the ships are earning slightly more than $1,000 per hour, and we've got 70 of those vessels. So we are earning $70,000 every hour. And you cannot, if someone call you on Christmas Eve, you cannot say that, sorry, I'm I'm having my Christmas dinner, so I cannot help you. You have to be ready to assist there and then, and that is partly passion, but it's also attitude. And what we are looking for is you need a base competence, of course, but I would say even more important is this passion, and particularly the attitude to really to go the extra mile for the ships and for the crews and for the company.
Almost like a mindset. You need to have that, either develop that mindset or sort of have it a bit naturally to, if you see a task, you own it, get on it as soon as you can. But yeah,
you have a few people that come in that have had parents that have been working in the industry, and they understand that you need this passion. But otherwise, you can identify that they have the attitude to become something, and then you can just cross fingers that the passion will come along.
I think, one part that I really loved about Odfjell is, the perspective on risk, not too afraid to have risk. Do you have a way of approaching risk? Because sometimes you're putting on initiative that, whether that's, suction sails or the green corridor or maybe a huge investments, the outcome can be somewhat uncertain, but you still feel comfortable taking that risk because it's part of the DNA of the history of the company. Do you have any, takeaway from the risks you have taken where you said that, okay, we have some risk associated with this, but it's in our company DNA to take it? And maybe, I don't know if, the family people involved, you have a great chairman. Is that also helpful that you actually have this trajectory to be a bit more risk appetite than other more traditional related firms?
Earlier we talked about innovation, and that gene is still, I would say, very, very much present in the family. So and I wouldn't call it taking risks, but the willingness to innovate is very strongly founded in the Odfjell family, and of course that willingness to innovate that goes through the whole organization. So people are not afraid for coming up with great ideas for something that we can improve. And I've never felt at any point that we've taken a risk with everything that we've done. We've started with kind of the low-hanging fruits, doing simple improvements, and then we see that we have success with it. And then we just continue with slightly more complicated projects, and if that's successful, then we go on and so on. I would say that 80% of what we've done has been successful, and then we've had, like anyone else, we've had some really big failures as well.
Yeah.
But all in sum, those projects that we have initiated have been a financial success, and they've also been an environmental success.
Mm. Because I feel some executives can have the perspective that, okay, remember, shipping is a capital-intensive industry. We don't know the fuel yet, so we don't going to invest. There's so many reasons to say that, okay, we're just going to wait a bit. But do you see any innovations, experiments that you're sort of seeing in your ecosystem that you feel, there should be more companies building around this idea, or there should be more initiatives in that? Or are you quite transparent in the experiments you run?
We are very transparent, and we share information with anyone who asks us. But you have the first 15 years, then our philosophy has been, and it still is, but the first 15 years we were focusing on reducing the fuel consumption. And the basis for that was that fuel is expensive, so the less fuel you are using, the better it is, and it's also good for the environment. And that will also go for the future fuel, because the only thing we know about the future fuel is that it will be significantly more expensive than the present fuel. So implementing systems to reduce simply the amount of fuel that you're using is good for everything. So that has kind of been the guiding for us. For 15 years, we have been dead laser focused on reducing fuel consumption, knowing that this is you cannot reduce yourself to zero, but we know that for every ton that we reduce, it's good for the environment, it's good for the financials, and it's a lessons learned when we in the future have to buy more expensive fuel. So the first time that we are deviating from that strategy is when we implemented this green corridor. That initiative is also good for the environment. It's not so good for for the finances, and we are no longer reducing the consumption. We are simply shifting from fossil fuel to biofuel. And that is a very important element that I think not so many people have understood.
And maybe also shipping, there is no known silver bullet. So it's more about several initiatives, and add them together and you have a substantial impact. There's not going to be one solution that solves everything and makes it.
No, I think we don't have a clear answer to that. But what we think is that I think that there is room for every good initiative when it comes to the green transition.